Chapter 73 The Circle of Death. A few minutes later, Sunny heard a noise coming from somewhere above. Looking in that direction, he noticed that Cassie was standing at the edge of the wide branch, gripping the golden rope in her hands. Before he could react, the blind girl was already climbing down. She was very cautious, but also quite nimble for someone without sight. He blinked. Is she crazy? That's dangerous. But he was worried for nothing. Cassie quickly reached the ground and let go of the rope, safe and sound. She then summoned her staff and took a hesitant step, trying to remember where his shout had come from. Sunny made his presence known and guided her by saying, "I'm here." The blind girl turned her head in his direction and walked forward, carefully feeling the ground in front of her with the staff. Because of how uneven the surface of the island had become, it took her longer than usual to reach him. Just as she was about to walk past, Sunny spoke again. "Hey, Cass." Cassie stopped and lowered her head with a surprised expression. Then she asked, "Why are you lying on the ground?" He smiled weakly. It's very comfortable." Suddenly, the blind girl frowned and asked in a worried tone, "Are you hurt?" Sunny shook his head with a sigh. His sense of humor was not always appreciated. In fact, it had often landed him in hot water in the past. "Just bruised all over. Nothing serious. I'm just really tired, that one was really intense." Since Cassie was still frowning, he thought for a moment and added, "Neff is also fine. She's resting a bit further away." Finally, the delicate girl relaxed. Her face cleared, and she offered him a hesitant smile. "You really killed that demon?" Sunny cast a gaze at the giant corpse and closed his eyes. "Yeah. He's very dead." Both of them were silent for some time. Sunny was on the verge of falling asleep when Cassie carefully asked, "So, you're just going to continue lying here?" He opened his eyes and blinked, trying to remember what was going on. "Oh, right. It's morning. There are things we have to do." The last day was excruciatingly long and exhausting. They had to make preparations to execute the plan, race to the top of the hill, climb the great tree, hide themselves in its branches, risk their lives to set the demon on fire, not to mention all the stuff that happened after. All culminating in the short but terrifying battle against the creature itself. And yet, it was not time to rest yet. They had to take basic precautions, at least. Straining his exhausted body, Sunny stood up and offered Cassie his shoulder. After she placed her hand on it, he walked over to the carapace demon's corpse, stopping at the spot where Nephice was sprawled in the sand. She greeted them with a tired glance. "Good morning." Out of habit, Changing Star tried to force a polite smile. However, today it did not look very convincing. I give it 3.6 out of 10. Not great, not terrible." Soon, the three of them were sitting in a circle, passing around the glass bottle full of cold, refreshing water. Sunny was in the middle of describing their fight with the carapace demon, so he got distracted for a few moments. That's when Neff attacked. She used her aspect ability to ignite her sword and struck at the weakened patch of armor on the demon's chest, the one you told us about. It really was not as strong as the rest of his carapace, so the sword went through and pierced the bastard's heart. Sunny noted that Cassie did not seem surprised at the mention of Changing Star's new trick. Either she knew all along because Nephice had told her, or she saw something in one of her visions. Regardless, he decided not to press the topic. The demon was already severely wounded from his fight with the thing from the sea, so it was enough to finish him off. A few seconds later he was dead. Cassie shook her head in astonishment. "That is incredible. 2 sleepers killing an awakened demon. I thought that stuff like that only happens in webtoons." Nephice corrected her. 3 sleepers. Without your vision and advice, we wouldn't have been able to do anything." The blind girl lowered her face, a little embarrassed. "Still, 2 or 3, it doesn't really change a lot, does it?" Sunny looked from one girl to another, then finally turned to Cassie. You're right, it's not something one would expect to happen. But anyway, I promised to cook demon meat for you after this is over, didn't I? Are you ready to witness my incredible culinary talent? He smiled, already tasting the juicy, tender meat in his mouth. However, Cassie suddenly frowned, a hesitant expression appearing on her face. I don't know about that. He raised his eyebrows. What? Why? She lingered before answering. Well, it just seems weird to eat the meat of an intelligent creature. Even if it was evil. I didn't think about it before, but now, it just doesn't seem right, I guess. Sunny blinked. Actually, he did not think about it either. In retrospect, the idea of making steaks out of a creature whose intelligence was comparable to theirs did seem a little wrong. Even if that creature was a bloodthirsty demon who would have swallowed them whole without a second thought. It was just how things worked in the dream realm. Monsters devoured humans, and humans devoured monsters. It was the circle of life, death? The circle of death. But the carapace demon was not only smart. He had his own thoughts and personality. Even though nightmare creatures were universally insane and obsessed with murder and destruction, just like he was, there were also other qualities to the ironclad giant. He was proud and fearless, even valiant. When fighting against the terrifying monsters of the Dark Sea, he did not hesitate to stand his ground, refusing to surrender. Cooking the meat of someone like that could indeed be considered strange. How come Teacher Julius did not educate me on the ethics of eating your enemies? What an oversight! Misunderstanding Sunny's silence, Cassie blushed and said, Sorry. I know it seems ridiculous, but that's just how I feel. You and Neff don't have to do the same. Sunny shook his head. No, you might be right. I understand, sort of. It's just that we didn't bring any supplies with us, so we won't be able to eat anything unless we go hunting. The blind girl sighed. Then, her face brightened and she said, What about the great tree's fruits? I bet they're delicious. Sunny looked at her in amazement. Are you serious? Cassie was visibly confused by his question. Yes? Why? He blinked a couple of times before answering. That tree is magnificent and pretty, but it's also very strange and suspicious. Why is it able to grow here when nothing else can? I'm pretty sure that it's the reason why all the coral around the Ashen Barrow is dead. Have you seen anything else capable of damaging the labyrinth itself? Sunny looked at Cassie, then at Nephi's, trying to show how serious he was about this. In any case, it's too creepy. I don't think that we should eat these fruits. Who knows what they'll do to us? The blind girl smiled. You're being a little paranoid, don't you think? A tree is a tree. Actually, I think it's a wonderful example of how life can prevail against all odds, even in this terrible place. I'm willing to bet that its fruits are perfectly fine. He stared at her, not knowing what to say. How could Cassie be so dismissive of his completely valid concern? That wasn't like her at all. Unpleasantly surprised, Sunny turned to Neff, hoping that she would support him. Changing Star thought things through before speaking. Then, she said in a measured voice. Sunny is right. There are too many strange things about that tree. Eating its fruits would be too risky. Finally, a voice of reason. He exhaled, relieved. However, his heart was still inexplicably gripped with worry. As Cassie sighed with disappointment, Changing Star turned to him and asked, The echo was destroyed? Sunny's face darkened. He was still pained by the loss of his loyal scavenger. Yeah. The demon acted faster than I had expected. He killed it before I could do anything. Nephi's frowned. Too bad. Our speed will be severely reduced. Have you no heart, woman? At least pretend to be sad. My poor Echo is gone. His shadow shook its head, amazed at the childishness of its master. Sunny was also surprised by his reaction. considering that his own first thought after the echo had died was about how much money he wouldn't be able to make by selling it. Yeah. It's a pity. Changing Star gave him a nod and then asked, You also lost your sword? Sunny sighed and gritted his teeth. Yes. It shattered when I blocked the demon's scythe, which hurt even more than the death of his scavenger. Azure Blade was his first sword. He fought and trained with it for a long time. It was already like a part of him. And now it was gone. Nephi's raised a hand. Well, you're in luck. I received a memory after killing the carapace demon. It's a weapon. Chapter 74 Midnight Shard. Sunny's heart skipped a bit. Instantly, he forgot all about the Azure Blade. Yes, that sword held a certain sentimental value, but who the hell cares about sentimentality? It came from a carapace scavenger, which wasn't bad at all for his current rank. Few sleepers got to wield awakened weapons. But this new memory came from an actual awakened demon. A demon! That made it an awakened memory of the third tier, 2 whole tiers above the Azure Blade. There were 7 tiers in total, corresponding to the 7 classes of nightmare creatures, from beasts to titans. Strictly speaking, a higher tier did not always mean that a memory will be more powerful, but generally, the more advanced a creature was, the more unique and formidable memories it left behind. That's why the Puppeteer's Shroud, which came from an awakened tyrant, and was thus considered to be a Tier 5 awakened armor, was so precious. Please be awesome. Sunny tried very hard to not let his excitement show on his face. Pretending to be nonchalant, he kept his voice even and said, Really? That's good. Nephi's took his hand, ruining all Sunny's attempts to appear calm, and closed her eyes. Hiding the startled expression on his face, Sunny felt a spark of energy travel from her body to his. It was just like that time he transferred the Starlight Legion armor to her, only in reverse. You have received a memory, Midnight Shard. Huh. Cool name. He summoned the runes and impatiently searched for the description of his new weapon. Memory, Midnight Shard. Memory rank, awakened. Memory type, weapon. Memory description, forged from the shard of a fallen star, this stalwart blade is firm and unyielding. It favors those who are willing to fight to the last drop of blood and knows no surrender. Interesting. Not wasting any time, Sunny summoned the Midnight Shard. Immediately, an elegant sword appeared in his hand. The sword looked a bit like the Azure Blade, but only in the sense that it was single-edged and had a long hilt suitable for 2 hands. However, this was where the similarities ended. For starters, its blade was much longer, somewhere between 70 and 80 centimeters, and slightly curved. It was forged out of the same bright, lustrous metal as the carapace demon's armor. It was incredibly sharp. The hilt was made out of polished black wood, quite similar in appearance to the onyx branches of the great tree. The cross-guard was round in shape and more pronounced than that of the Azure Blade, offering better support and protection to the wielder's hand. The sword had no decorations, no ornaments, no embellishments. It was simple and austere, like a true weapon designed for battle and battle alone. It seemed to radiate a cold, fearsome aura. As soon as his hand touched the Midnight Shard, Sunny felt that this sword possessed an unbreakable will. Its blade was strong enough to withstand devastating blows without suffering any damage. With this sword in his hand, nothing would be able to leave Sunny unarmed again. More than that, there was a strange new sensation somewhere deep in his heart. When Sunny held the Midnight Shard, he could feel a subtle presence, as though there was a deep well of power hiding inside of him, just beyond reach. He couldn't quite understand how to access that power yet, but it was certainly real. I guess I'll have to win its favor first. But how do I do it? I'll have to experiment later. Admiring his new weapon, Sunny looked at Nephi's and said, Even I know what type of sword this is. It's a katana, right? She studied the Midnight Shard and then answered, Technically it's a tachi. It's longer than a traditional katana and has a slightly different blade shape. But they're quite similar. Itachi, well, it sounded nice anyway. And most of the principles he had learned with the Azure Blade could be applied to a sword of this type as well, since they shared the same foundation. The new acquisition wasn't quite enough to make Sunny forget about the loss of the Echo, but his mood did improve significantly. He liked the Midnight Shard a lot. There was beauty in its simple, resolute design. It was understated and deadly. Kind of like Sunny himself. It was a significant upgrade. Suddenly, a dark thought appeared in Sunny's mind. Glancing at Nephi's, he cleared his throat and said after a bit of hesitation, it's a very nice weapon. Tier 3, no less. Are you sure that you don't want to keep it for yourself? Changing Star was the one to deal the final blow to the Carapace demon, after all. By right, the memory belonged to her. But Sunny really hoped that she would refuse. Nephi shook her head. I already have a sword. It suits me. Inwardly, Sunny sighed with relief. Good, he thought. Makes you wonder, though, if she's unwilling to exchange her long sword for a Tier 3 weapon, then what is the tier of that silver sword of hers? He didn't buy the idea that it simply suited Changing Star better even for a second. She had told him herself that the principle of using these types of swords was basically the same. Upgrading to the Midnight Shard and giving the old weapon to Sunny would not have caused her any problem. The only reason she would refuse it was that it would have been a downgrade, instead. Once again, he became curious about the exact circumstances of how Neph had gotten her true name. To receive his own, Sunny had to kill an awakened tyrant. Could it be possible that she had done the same? Or even, something more incredible? But he was too tired to try and fish for information. They all were. Afraid that the strange winged creature they had seen devouring a dead centurion would appear again, this time to claim the remains of the Carapace demon, the three sleepers relocated to a far side of the island and hid behind the trunk of the great tree. Only when they were sure that nothing would be able to notice them from above did they finally allow the exhaustion to prevail, and went to sleep. Sunny fell into dreamless darkness almost instantly, happy to finally be able to rest. However, this time something strange happened. He actually saw a dream. Strange, Sunny thought. This isn't supposed to happen in the dream realm, right? Then, there was no more time to think. Chapter 75 Broken Dreams. Sunny woke up from the insistent sense of alarm coming from his shadow. Groggy and disoriented, he opened his eyes and sat up. What's wrong? He looked down at the shadow and saw it repeatedly pointing up with a tense expression on its, well, it didn't have a face. He could just tell that it was nervous. Trouble? Sunny looked up and saw nothing but the scarlet leaves of the great tree. The sky was hidden, but he could easily tell that the sun was still up. It seemed that he was asleep for just a few hours. There was no threat anywhere in sight. He frowned. What got you so spooked? The shadow just pointed up again, seemingly irritated by his stupidity. Sunny blinked a couple of times and addressed it again. High in the tree? Higher? In the sky? Finally satisfied, the shadow crossed its arms. Something dangerous is above the island, that creepy raven thing again? He had to check, but why did he feel as though he was forgetting something? Sunny scowled, trying to understand where this feeling of missing something important had come from. What was there to miss? He was asleep, then woke up and conversed with the shadow. Asleep? Suddenly he remembered bits and pieces of a strange dream. At least it seemed like a dream, was it? People weren't supposed to dream in the dream realm. It was just how things worked. From what he knew, only Cassie seemed to be an exception from this rule. He didn't remember much about this supposed dream of his, with even the remaining fragments already fading from his memory. There was a woman grabbing him by the shoulders, an expression of horror and panic on her face. She was saying something, but he couldn't hear what. No, not a woman. It was Cassie? Yes, it was her. And the things she was saying. Sonny strained his memory, trying to catch the pieces of the dream before they completely disappeared. Yeah, I think she was saying, Suddenly, he could clearly hear Cassie's frightened, tense voice as she was hurriedly telling him to remember something, repeating the same sentence over and over again in a begging tone. You have to remember, Sonny. 5. It's 5. Remember. You have to remember. It's 5. What a strange dream. Sonny cast a glance at Cassie, who was sleeping peacefully near Neff, and shook his head in bewilderment. He wasn't sure if this memory of his was really a dream or some strange scene he had imagined right before falling asleep. With how the dream realm worked, he was leaning toward the latter possibility. Still, I'd better tell the girls when. He was distracted from this thought by the shadow, which waved its hands impatiently. Oh, right. There's a threat in the sky. Instantly, Sonny had forgotten all about his intention to share the contents of this strange memory of his with Nephis and Cassie. In fact, he had forgotten that it was strange and possibly important altogether. This lapse in his judgment was sudden and unnatural, but since Sonny couldn't remember things that he had forgotten, he didn't notice anything amiss and went about his business as if nothing had happened. If he did, he could have realized that this might not have been the first time he had forgotten something important since they arrived at the Ashen Barrow. Standing up, Sonny summoned the midnight shard and glanced darkly at the blood-red leaves of the great tree. Feeling the coolness of the black polished hilt in his hand, he felt a little calmer. Woken up by his quiet movements, Nephis opened her eyes and looked at him, her body tensing up. There was a silent question in her eyes. Sonny shook his head. I don't know yet. Stay with Cassie while I check things out. Leaving the girls behind, Sonny walked forward. He was planning to reach the edge of the island, where the branches of the colossal tree were not as thick and the sky could be seen through the openings in its crown. Technically, he could have sent his shadow to do this instead of going himself. But in situations like this, where the danger was unknown, Sonny usually preferred to keep the shadow close by in case he needed to use it. Reaching the eastern slope of the Ashen Barrow, he carefully looked up, still hidden in the shadow of the great tree. Up above in the vast gray sky, a small black dot was circling around the island. Sonny's chest became heavy with weariness. Back when the terrible winged beast had first appeared, it looked exactly like this from the distance. Leaving the shadow behind to keep watch on the black dot, he returned and briefly told Nephis and Cassie about his discovery. Right now, it's just flying above the island. I don't know if it's the same creature or not, and when it is going to land. Changing Star frowned. Last time, it wasn't very interested in searching for live prey. Perhaps it's mostly a carrion eater, and thus is only interested in the carapace demon's carcass. Cassie offered her own opinion. Maybe we're too weak and little to satiate it. After all, it never came for the corpses of the scavengers we had slain. As if eating mere beasts is beneath it. Sonny shook his head. Back then, it did come for the carapace centurion's meat. But it took a few scavengers with it as well before leaving. So it'll be too optimistic to think that this abomination will not try to devour us too if given a chance. Nephis thought for a while, then gave him a nod. You're right. The best course of action would be to stay away from the carapace demon for now and hide when it decides to land. Then, looking up, she added, but first, we must observe it to make sure that it's the same creature and confirm its intentions. Not having an argument against this logic, Sonny led the girls to the spot where he had left his shadow. There, they sat on the ground and watched the black dot as it circled around the Ashen Barrow. Observing the flying creature left them disturbed and unsure of what to do. The black dot drew closer a few times, allowing them to discern that it was indeed the same terrible monstrosity that they had encountered a few weeks before, or at least a creature of the same type. However, it never got too close to the crown of the great tree, as though hesitating to land in its shadow. What's worse, as hours passed by, it was joined by 2 other abominations of the same breed, each as horrifying and repulsive as the first one was. Now 3 black dots were circling in the skies above their heads, filling Sunny's heart with dread. One of those creatures, with its corpse-like white body and raven-black feathers, with an unnatural mess of powerful limbs protruding from its wide chest, each ending with a set of terrifying talons, was enough to wipe out their entire group. The memory of how easily the creature had broken through the adamantine shell of the carapace centurion with its massive beak was still fresh in his mind. He suspected that these abominations were at least as powerful as the carapace demon was, or perhaps even more so. And now there were 3 of them. We'd better hide well, he thought, cold sweat running down his back. However, the flying monsters seemed to be reluctant to approach the ashen barrel for some reason. They just circled around it, sometimes hesitantly approaching, but then gaining height again. Their behavior was strange and disturbing. After some time, Cassie quietly said, "Maybe they're not hungry." Sunny blinked, trying to imagine a world where a nightmare creature might not be hungry. Was it even possible? He, on the other hand, "I don't know about these albino chickens, but I'm hungry as hell." This was true. The 3 of them had not eaten anything since yesterday. Sunny was afraid that if the abominations did decide to land on the island, the loud growls of his stomach would give away his position. Nephi's glanced at him and asked, "Want to eat some grilled chicken?" Sunny opened his eyes wide and hissed, "Don't even think about it." She stared at him, then turned away with a smile. That was a joke? She knows how to joke? Well, at least someone's sense of humor was worse than his. In the end, their worst fears did not come true. After the sun began to roll toward the horizon, the 3 flying abominations finally made a decision and left the skies above the ashen barrow, flying west in a loose wedge formation. They never descended low enough to notice the 3 sleepers, let alone landing on the surface of the large island. Sunny was left drenched in sweat and tired from anticipating a disaster, almost disappointed at the fact that all this worrying had turned out to be for nothing. Looking at Cassie, who couldn't see that the danger had passed, he said, "They're gone." The blind girl exhaled with relief and relaxed, the frown disappearing from her face. Thank heavens. Sitting here and waiting was 5 times worse than hiding from one of them at those cliffs. For some reason, Sunny flinched a little. What did you say?" "I said that waiting for them to land was very tiresome." He blinked, not understanding why he had reacted so strangely to this innocuous sentence. Did he see a dream having to do with Cassie and number 5? Right, he did. Not that it was anything to think twice about. "Oh, yeah? You're right." Then he turned to Nephis and asked, "What do you want to do now?" Changing Star looked west, where the black dots had disappeared from sight, and said after a short pause, "Let's check the western edge of the island and decide on the next high point to reach." Sunny shrugged, not having any objections. Cassie smiled. "Good idea. Who knows, maybe we'll finally see the walls of the castle." Soon, they had crossed the island and approached its western slope. Here, the ground was raised just before plunging down, forming a natural rampart that hid the landscape from their eyes. Nephis was the first to climb up and reach the top. Sunny was just behind her when he felt that something was wrong. Changing Star's posture was somehow strange, stiff and rigid, as though she had suddenly turned to stone. Stepping on the ashen surface of the natural rampart, he worriedly looked at Nephis and noticed a grim, resentful expression on her face. He had never seen her in such a state before. Turning his head, Sunny looked west and then narrowed his eyes. His face instantly darkened. Feeling the desire to curse, Sunny gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. Inside his head, only one word was repeating over and over again. "Damn! Damn! Damn!"